Good morning to all, and welcome to this side event from the High-Level Political Forum of 2022, Translating Ideas into Action, Cooperation between State and Non-State Actors to Fully Achieve the SDGs. I want to extend my greetings to Her Excellency, Mr. Hyun-Ju Oh, Ambassador and Acting Permanent Representative of the Republic of Korea to the United Nations, Her Excellency Ms. Marie-Louise Koch Wachter, Deputy Permanent Representative of the Kingdom of Denmark to the United Nations, Ms. Mireya Villar Forner, Resident Coordinator of the United Nations in Colombia, Mr. Ian De Cruz, Global Director of P4G, Mr. Ernesto Soria Morales, Ms. Lisa Ashford, Ms. Sonia Hernandez Barrado, Ms. Helen Gardin, Mr. Shang-Soo Kim, and Ms. Faride Carlier. From the National Planning Department in Colombia, I would like to thank the United Nations for selecting this proposal that we presented from Colombia, Korea, and Denmark on this side event, and I feel honored to share this space with such high-level professionals who have a deep understanding of the challenges we face on promoting the SDG agenda. I will also like to extend a greeting to the moderator of our panel discussion today, Ernesto Soria Morales, Head of the Policy Coherence for Sustainable Development Unit of the OECD. The implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals has become a challenge to build them back better, and at the same time, an opportunity to build the future that we want, understanding that it requires efforts from different stakeholders. I would like to introduce Her Excellency, Mr. Hyun-Ju Ho, Ambassador and Acting Permanent Representative of the Republic of Korea to the United Nations, who will give a few words of welcoming. Mr. Hyun-Ju Ho, Ambassador, are you there? We are sorry for the inconvenience. We are experiencing some difficult technologies that we are figuring out. Well, I'm sorry, we're having some technical difficulties. But the ambassador will just connect again and will start his welcoming words. If you give us please, some minutes. Thank you all for connecting to this event. And we will continue with our program in just a few seconds as we resolve these technical issues.
Can you see me and hear me?
Yes, we do.
Finally.
Sorry.
I'm glad I'm at the stage. Good morning, colleagues and friends, and I'm sorry for the technical glitches that I cannot identify. Good afternoon or good evening to some of the colleagues who are in the different parts of the world. I think even with the technical glitches, we are able to overcome the geographical distance and then gather together at this very important meeting. It is very early in the morning in New York, and I'm pleased to open this important event. I'm even more pleased to co-host this event with our Colombian and Danish colleagues and friends, which together form the P4G Troika. This is indeed a very good example of cooperation and partnership, which I'm sure will be even more reinforced in the coming years. 7 years ago, the world adopted an ambitious and comprehensive set of goals and targets for the sustainable development of all mankind and the planet, namely the 2030 Agenda. It was a 15-year plan until 2030, and now we are exactly at the halfway. So how have we done so far? Are we in the right place for the timely achievement of the goals and targets? Are we going in the right direction? According to the 2022 Sustainable Development Report by SDSN, progress was made globally on the SDGs between 2015 and 2019, but I quote, recent health and security crises have shifted attention away from long-term goals such as climate action and exposed major fragmentation in multilateralism, end of quote. Indeed, currently we are at the midst of a multidimensional crisis compounded by climate change, geographical tensions, global food and energy security concerns, disruptions in supply chains, refugee crises, as well as increasing poverty, all of which put the 2030 Agenda at risk. We can say we have lost more than 2 years of a precious time. So what should we do? This year's theme for the high-level political forum is building back better from coronavirus diseases while advancing the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which is very timely at this critical juncture. We have to not only recover from the damages to our development gains, but also accelerate the process for the full implementation of SDGs. This enormous task can be done only when we join forces, all of our forces together. There is an old African saying, which is one of my favorites, which goes, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Similarly, an old Korean saying goes, even a piece of paper feels lighter when it is shared. These ancient wisdoms across the different human societies teach us the importance of the working together and partnership. Partnership is one of the 5 focus areas this year's HLPF and the main theme of today's discussion. We will learn some of the excellent examples of partnership initiatives, such as Colombia's SDG multi-stakeholder platform, partnering for green growth and global goals 2030, namely P4G, and many others. We will have excellent speakers and panelists from the government, private sector, civil society, and international organizations. And it is my sincere hope that through today's discussion, we can advance our understanding of true potential of this partnership. Once again, thank you very much, my colleagues and friends, those who have worked very hard for the preparation of this year, and the speakers and panelists for their valuable contribution will be highly appreciated. Thank you very much for your participation and enjoy the discussion.
Thank you so much for these welcoming words, Her Excellency Ms. Hyun-Joo Ho, Ambassador and Acting Permanent Representative of the Republic of Korea to the United Nations. Now I'm going to give a few words from the Colombia context and what we have been working in terms of the multi-stakeholder platform. The world social and economic context demands joint work between the different stakeholders: the government, the private sector, the civil society, organizations, academia, international organizations, and all the actors that play a role in the promotion of sustainable development. To achieve the post-COVID recovery, reactivate the economy, and continue advancing towards the consolidation of sustainable development model, the commitment of different actors is needed. I would like to share in this event from the Technical Secretary of the SDG, of the High-Level Commission of the SDGs in Colombia, our experience, a good practice and lessons learned in the roadmap of implementation of a multi-stakeholder mechanism to accelerate the SDGs, starting by extending a cordial greeting to a good partner on this path, Ernesto Soria, and the OECD Public Governance Directorate, from which we received technical support regarding the guidelines of how to bring together state and non-state participants around the same common SDG agenda. Colombia's leadership in defining and promoting the 2030 Agenda has made it possible to design an institutional framework for the implementation of the SDGs, establishing specific goals and linking the state action to the fulfillment of the 2030 Agenda. Colombia recognizes the necessity of working intensely in terms of measuring public policies, contributions, and mobilizing resources to continue with an effective implementation of the SDGs. The Colombia government reaffirms the global commitment that has been taken to fulfill the 2030 Agenda through strategic alliances because of identifying the challenges and opportunities of the SDGs year after year. The national SDG policy defines a strategy for the implementation of the SDGs in Colombia through 4 lines of actions. First, tracking and reporting scheme. Second, strengthening the data production plan. Third, implementing the SDGs at the subnational level. And 4, mobilizing different stakeholders and financial resources. Throughout these strategic lines, the 169 agreed goals will hopefully be achieved. Regarding the stakeholders' engagement, we need to start from the premise that non-actor on their own can make the 2030 Agenda a reality. The involvement of different stakeholders is essential to accelerate the achievement of the SDGs. In that order, I'm going to refer to the progress made by Colombia to consolidate our own multi-stakeholder mechanism. A peer learning activity for enhancing the policy coherence for sustainable development has been carried out in 2020 with the support of the OECD Public Governance Directorate and had the participation of Sweden and Spain as invited peer countries. This event aimed to promote learning among peers to identify the essential elements that allow different actors to articulate in the implementation of the SDGs. Based on the guidelines of the 4 specific working groups that deal with the issues such as governance, stakeholder involvement, criteria and mechanism, resource mobilization, and COVID-19, the technical team collected reflections and experiences on the possibilities, recommendations, and challenges to create a multi-stakeholder platform in Colombia to advance in the implementation of the SDGs in the country. Based on this, Colombia approved last year and launched this year the SDG multi-stakeholder platform as a mechanism for long-term, regular and continuous official dialogue and interlocution between the SDG Commission and non-governmental actors, between the private sector, organized civil society, international cooperation, academia, and the Congress of the Republic. To promote and strengthen the appropriation and capacity for action around the 2030 agenda, develop initiatives and projects with the participation of different actors. Knowledge management and exchange of good practices contribute to the review of national and local reports that the country presents, and allowing progress in trust and involvement in the different stakeholders to accelerate the implementation and achievement of the SDGs. In the Colombian institutional framework of the 2030 Agenda implementation, this platform is a mechanism for this interaction and dialogue between the different actors, whose main objective is the alignment of efforts to advance towards a sustainable development in the coming years until 2030. Among its main functions are strategies for real engagement and mobilization of stakeholders and resources, promote and facilitate spaces and mechanisms of dialogue, and perhaps most important for sustainable of addressing the SDGs, provide inputs for the new national development plan. As you know, we are in the process of changing government, so this is an opportunity from this multi-stakeholder platform to provide inputs for this new development plan that will be constructed soon. The platform's executive committee has already had 2 sessions to the date and have been defining priorities on how to advance in the SDG agenda. So just to conclude and have some remarks, just the importance of having different stakeholders in the advance of the SDG agenda. We just launched this multi-stakeholder platform where we have different actors, where we include the local and the national level government, where we include the private sector, the civil society, the international cooperation, the academy, and the parliament. It's in this way that we will continue to move forward into the SDG implementation in the country. With this experience in Colombia, and also that we have the experience of being part of P4G, I will now like to give the floor and to share some key points about the experience of involving different stakeholders on SDGs to Mr. Ian De Cruz, Global Director of Partnering for Green Growth and the Global Goals 2030, who is going to talk about the delivery of P4G. Ian, the floor is yours.
And if we could go to the presentation, I'd like to thank the Colombian, Danish, and Korean governments for hosting this event. As Ambassador O mentioned, these 3 countries are part of our Troika system in P4G, with Denmark as a fund and host of our inaugural 2018 P4G Summit, Korea as a fund and host of our 2021 Summit, and Colombia as a leading nation with P4G working together with us, and also our host for our 2023 P4G Summit. It is wonderful to have these 3 countries as leaders in green growth and action on both climate and sustainable development goals in this decade of action, where P4G is a delivery platform for climate and sustainable development. If we can go to the next slide, you can see that P4G itself is a partnership, a partnership of 12 partner countries and 5 international organizations focused on contributing to green and inclusive growth by accelerating green business models in developing countries across 5 key areas of food, water, energy, cities, and the circular economy. And I think this is a distinguishing feature of P4G, where we can take these global goals, but really put it into country contexts and national platforms like Colombia. So in our national platforms in Colombia, as Olga says, you have this great ecosystem that we have in our national platform government, represented by the Department of National Planning and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to bring these global goals and national goals together as a key shaper of our partnerships. In Pulsar, which is part of the Ministry of Trade, which helps bring this ecosystem of entrepreneurs, startups, who are looking to come up with these disruptive, innovative business models that is good for sustainable development and climate action, and their premier business chamber of commerce, Andy, who help with the private sector engagement and scaling of this work. And it is these national platforms working with the global hub that we are looking to develop these prospective partnerships and partnerships pipelines aligned with the country priorities. And in collaboration with the private sector, start to implement these excellent national plans held by countries, including Colombia, in the Sustainable Development Goals and climate action at the speed and scale of action required in this decade of action. So as you can see in this map, we have wonderful partners. So not only are Denmark, Netherlands, and Korea key funders of P4G, but they're key leaders in green growth technology and investment. And we're seeing how these countries can really support Colombia and Mexico in the region, Ethiopia, Kenya, South Africa, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Vietnam on their terms, and really flip this map where the trade and investment flows start from need in these countries, and then really leveraging the technology investment coming from our core funders here in P4G. We're also fortunate with our 5 partner organizations to ensure that our partnerships are underpinned by research and science with the World Resources Institute, that this involves city and country engagement through C40 Cities and Global Green Growth Institute, business engagement through World Economic Forum, and finance and investment through the International Finance Corporation. If we can go to the next slide, we start to see what P4G has done in its phase 1 from 2018 to 2022. And these results are really early stage results from our 2018 to 2020 partnerships, because it takes about 2 years to really see the full effect of partnerships. But we've looked and we've helped incubate and source and originate 66 partnerships. Within these partnerships, they've looked at dealing with environmental impact, including both mitigation and adaptation. In this case, 175,000 metric tons of carbon emissions reduced, over 290,000 individual people positively affected, and leveraging investment of over 235 million. And this is on the basis of a fairly modest grant funding model of around $25 to $30 million worth of partnerships over this period. And this is hopefully a great example for all of you people out there, when you're looking at an innovative approach. How do we bring scale of action in terms of countries based on their national plans and priorities that look to really leverage the private sector investment, but ultimately for community and environmental impact. We'd like to think P4G is an approach to think about being part of and to see as an inspiration of other initiatives doing the same thing. So if we can go to the next slide, there's Ambassador O provided some sobering feedback. And she said, where are we halfway through this 15-year plan for both Sustainable Development Goals and climate action? And from P4G, from our experience, the problem that we're looking to solve and the gap that we exist is between how the development world looks at capital and how the investment world looks at capital. So the big gap is that to implement the Sustainable Development Goals, this will take about $4.2 trillion worth of investment. But overseas development assistance only provides around 160 billion. So that's a huge difference in what we need to leverage with that development capital to what we need to implement for the Sustainable Development Goals. So as we look forward, not only, our prompt in P4G is, where are the solutions? We've got great plans, we've great capacity building, advocacy, coalitions, technical assistance, but where are those solutions? And where are the solutions that can be implemented? And there's a report coming up from the World Resources Institute, co-authored with the Global Impact Investing Network, that really says the key issue here is that partnerships need to move beyond grant funding to mobilize private financing. And that is at the heart of the gap that we're looking to fill. So that means we need to move beyond political capital, reputation, risk, and bureaucratic processes to actually, what are the solutions that actually can bring the entrepreneur right at the heart of it, that can bring the private sector and their capital as quickly as possible, but aligned with these national priorities. That's what we are looking to achieve. And in P4G, we say you can't start with the trillions, let alone the billions, if you do not start with the millions. And we see the critical gap is transactions in the size of 1 to 5 million, where you are looking at these new attractive investable business models that have to experiment, take high risk and early stage to move up to a $5 to $50 million transaction size when development financial institutions really can take over. So that's the gap with these micro, small, medium enterprises aligned with national platforms that P4G wants to be part of. If we can go to the next slide, this really helps to really emphasize what makes P4G unique. And what makes P4G unique is really our ability to look at these green business models right at the start, working with our national platforms like Colombia, finding these entrepreneurs that are aligned with the plans of national plans of sustainable development goals and climate actions, but right from the start are moving beyond grant funding. And the way that we have learned over those 4 years is, do they even have a business plan? And it's a strange thing to say in a non-government organization world and development world, but in the business world, that's what you start off with. What is your business plan for growth? How will you move beyond grant funding? So that's what we now start with. What is your business plan? What is your business model? The second thing is those business plans and models have to be aligned with what our countries are asking for. Colombia has some of the best plans in the world. And so with those clear plans, we want to have that precision. What are you looking for in renewable energy that will help Colombia's national plan on climate action? As an example, working with DNP is critical. Within that, we want our partner countries to help create that conducive environment for these green inclusive models. So what are the policy and regulatory barriers that have to be removed or need to be implemented? And we're being more explicit as we go forward to ask that question from our partnerships as well in how they can do that. And finally, to bring the private sector, our ultimate success of partnerships is what happens when our grant funding stops after 2 years. And the key for us is who's taking that on? What is the exit strategy for someone else to come on to take that up and to invest further? And you'll hear a little bit from Lisa Ashford from Energize Africa about how we're working with that partnership to help this. So when you look at the next slide, you will see for us what are characteristics of a strong P4G partnership. But I think in this context that we're talking about, what are examples of solutions in this decade of action that we all need to use as core themes and elements to test the credibility of approaches, initiatives, platforms, and solutions in this decade of action. So the first one we start off is, from a business perspective, is there even an innovative, green, inclusive, and financially sustainable business model? Is there a solution there? A solution that is not driven from a government perspective or driven from an NGO, but actually has a business model? That's the first. It has to align with the core national climate and development priorities. The third is it has to have political support and buy-in, and that's why national platforms like Colombia become so important to actually drive the policy and regulatory interventions that are required. The fourth one is we must have strong local, commercial, and non-commercial partners with that geographic and sectoral expertise. And what we crowd in with P4G is a wonderful ecosystem with our Danes, our Koreans, our Dutch colleagues to bring in some of their best technology and expertise, but along these lines of what the local partners want to drive. And so that's what P4G's value add is to actually be that matchmaker all the way from who are those great entrepreneurs, where are they sourced ideally from our local countries, but how can they be scaled with our international organizations, with our NGO partners and our partner countries to become a self-sustaining investable business model, right? So if you think about in 1992 and you put up a smartphone and you said, this smartphone is going to revolutionize the world. You will no longer need your landline, but this phone is not just a phone. It also is a source of business. It's a source of entertainment. It's a source of financial transactions. You'd think I was crazy, but that's what we're doing. We're saying, what is the world in 2050? What are those solutions to get us to net zero, to create a sustainable development world? But now in 2022, are core to be developed, to be scaled, so that in 30 years' time, we can look in mainstream and say, well, that was fantastic. And for us in P4G, these come from our emerging economies. So in the next slide, what you see are 3 examples of what I call green unicorns, these potential revolutionary ideas for the future that P4G is proud to be part of amongst our 66 partnerships. The first one, Africa Green Co, is bringing renewable energy investment through the private sector in Zambia and Southern Africa when they didn't have that investment. The utilities did not have, government-owned enterprises there in Zambia did not have the money to invest and had to find sources from the private sector. What Africa Green Co provided was an intermediary, an independent intermediary that was creditworthy, could attract private sector investment, and has started to have an operating license and actually implementing a 25 megawatt solar project. This is pretty revolutionary in this context to bring private sector investment for renewable energy to give access to energy for people in Zambia and more broadly in the Southern African power pool. P4G added value by helping give the legitimacy with the government to get that operating license, to help with commercial advisory support for this partnership that got investment from our Danish development financial institution, IFU, to take this from a 1 to 5 million to now over $15-20 million transaction. And we're seeing how that model can scale into Southern Africa, potentially including our partner country in South Africa and beyond. The second example from Asia is how we're looking to turn food waste into an asset in Indonesia, leveraging Korean technology in how to extract food waste from products and turn it into a food product that can be utilized in Indonesia to address food security issues. It's part of a cluster of partnerships on food loss and waste that we have in Indonesia, Mexico, and South Africa as part of Sustainable Development Goal 12.3 about how to halve food loss and waste by 2030. And not only halve the food loss and waste, but turn that into an asset that can be a source of investment into the future for jobs, investment in Indonesia, and using Korean technology in this case. The third example from Latin America is around net zero affordable homes. How do we create homes which have all the building energy efficiency for net zero homes that is also affordable and becomes self-sufficient and actually becomes its own business model for investment? And we're looking to trial that in Mexico with interest in how to do this in Colombia as part of a broader push in global coalitions around reaching building energy efficiency as a core source of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. So hopefully that gives you a brief taste. You'll have a lot more detail about this from Lisa Ashford. She will talk about one of our best partnerships, Energize Africa, and hopefully give you a very practical example of how to do this. So in the final slide, as you look forward and as you think about how do we translate ideas into action, we leave you with these key points. The first one is we can only do this through partnerships. So at the core, how do you have private, public sector, and the civil society all baked into your solution, but one that really has to be investable. If there's only one takeaway you take from here is how do you turn 160 billion in development capital to $4.2 trillion investment opportunity? That's a huge leverage. And as Ambassador said, we only have 7.5 years. So right from the start, any solution has to involve those parties and has to become investable if we want to be serious. The second is our developing countries, our countries like Bangladesh, our countries like Colombia, like Ethiopia, they're not just victims of climate change for P4G. They are agents of change for themselves based on their national plans, but that's where the finance technology has to be crowd-ended in to develop those market solutions there based on the green unicorns of their local entrepreneurs. That's where we need to focus our attention collectively. And to elevate these partnerships into global moments, we're very excited. Thank Denmark for hosting us in 2018 and Korea in 2021 and 2023 in Colombia is to see homegrown local solutions, to see these green unicorns come to life. So, that will be a very exciting time for P4G and for Colombia. And please look to co-invest in P4G and our partnerships, because this is, if you want to translate ideas into action, P4G is that vehicle to do so. Thank you, Olga. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ian, for that presentation of P4G and this as an example of how can you involve different stakeholders to advance into the SDGs. I'm going now to introduce our guest, Mr. Ernesto Soria Morales, Head of the Policy Coherence for Sustainable Development Unit of the OECD Public Governance Directorate, who will moderate the panel discussion, Best Practice to Effectively Implement the SDGs in a Continuous and Participatory Public-Private Process. The guidelines and recommendations on policy coherence for sustainable development from the OECD Public Governance Directorate was taken into account in Colombia roadmap on multi-stakeholder engagement mechanism. So it's very important to share the experience in multilateralism and collaborative work approach as a requirement to promote and establish successful alliances between the public and private sectors in the effective implementation of the SDGs. Ernesto, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olga, and thank you for highlighting the excellent collaboration we had in this small project that led to the establishment of this multi-stakeholder platform in Colombia. And good morning, everyone from New York, and of course, good afternoon or good evening for those joining us from different parts of the world. A very warm welcome to this panel discussion. I'm very pleased to be the moderator for this panel discussion. Thank you again, co-organizers, for this invitation. This panel discussion is very timely, as you know, the pandemic has set back progress towards the SDGs almost everywhere and has slowed implementation of the 2030 agenda overall. So, but we know from the experience for the past 7 years of SDG implementation that diverse stakeholders, including business, industry, civil society, science, and academia, have important roles to play in accelerating progress towards the SDGs. And these roles range from resource mobilization, provision of solutions and innovation, changing production and consumption patterns and lifestyles, and of course, advocacy and accountability to giving voice to the concerns and needs of those that are underrepresented, and also to help ensure accountability and on actions to achieve these goals. But we also know that the interaction and collaboration between state and non-state actors is not always easy. Actually, from the experience of my work, which focuses on enhancing policy coherence in government implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, we've seen a lot of bottlenecks and challenges in engaging different stakeholders in implementation as partners. And of course, this entails ensuring that there are mechanisms such as this mechanism that is being launched by Colombia that allow for active participation, commitment, and engagement by multiple stakeholders. So the purpose of this panel is to reflect on some of the lessons and, of course, share best practices to effectively implement the SDGs in a continuous and participatory public-private process. And with this context and to discuss some of these issues, we are delighted to be joined by the distinguished panel of 5 speakers. Let me introduce briefly the speakers. So first, we will hear from Mrs. Mireia Villar-Forner, who's the UN Resident Coordinator for Colombia. And Mireia has served in the United Nations for 25 years. Before her appointment in Colombia, she was the Resident Coordinator in Uruguay, where she led the UN system's efforts to accelerate the achievement of the 2030 Agenda. During her long career within the UN, she has worked in various capacities for the UNDP. I don't want to take too much time, but it's great to have you here, Mireia. And Mireia, from the point of view of the UN agencies, maybe a question to you is, what would be your analysis of the multi-stakeholder interaction with member states in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals? So Mireia, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Excellent. Well, let me start by thanking the organizers for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to join this side event, and of course, special greetings to the member states, Colombia, Denmark, and the Republic of Korea, and of course, my fellow panelists and participants. Look, for me professionally, but even frankly, personally, one of the most exciting things about the 2030 Agenda has been this possibility to venture out of the walls of the UN and work with so many unexpected partners. And as you were mentioning, I've been around as a development practitioner for quite a while, serving in 4 different continents. It's not that I haven't had my share of collaboration with civil society and even academia in particular, but I think what we have now, thanks to SDG 17, has us operating in a whole different league in terms of multi-stakeholder partnership. So what about this new generation of partnership? What do they look like, and what do they mean for us as UN country teams around the world? So on the first, I think one of the very main differences between what we did under the MDGs and now the SDGs is precisely this recognition and this notion that we will need global partnerships as the key means of implementation. And it was mentioned already, this idea that the goals won't be achieved solely by government or cooperation, but that we need the shared responsibility and the key role of the private financial institutions, civil society, the scientific community that has come to the fore largely in this pandemic, but also the world of culture, media, and the citizens in general. This is something you have all referred to. And we have a definition in the UN of this partnership that recognizes, the variety of origins in their membership, their voluntary nature, how they are governmental, intergovernmental, etc. But what I really wanted to highlight, because I think it's what's very different this time around, are some of the characteristics that make this work so exciting. First, I think these new partnerships are all anchored in a shared belief in sustainable development, but also in the idea that we are all needed, that there is space for all of us in this agenda, that to build a better world, we need to be supportive, empathetic, inventive, even passionate, but above all, very cooperative. Second, these new partnerships are grounded, I would say, in a more level playing field of stakeholders. This is not anymore about contracting arrangements, particularly among the UN and some of the other actors. These are now collaborations that need to shape the ecosystems from where we are designing the solutions to these very large and big challenges that we have at the planet level. And third, we are pursuing these partnerships because we need scale, we need acceleration of results, and we need to transform our current systems. And I think these 3 are the true benchmarks against which we should be measuring the impact of these partnerships. We achieve scale when we're able to protect the public goods and leverage public resources within the market, in the market itself. We transform when we're able to bring new perspectives, thinking, and scientific evidence in the design of these solutions that we need. And we accelerate when we act together. And much of the acceleration has to do with the decade of action that the Secretary General put forward, which call us to work at 3 levels: at the global level, securing greater leadership, more resources, smarter solutions; at the local level, embedding the transitions into the policies, the local markets, the budgets of each country; and at the level of the people, because these are the ones that are going to generate the movement that we need for this transformation. These partnerships have taken many shapes and forms. Many of these partnerships have come about in support of sustainable development, mobilizing and sharing knowledge, mobilizing expertise, technology, and even financial resources. Partnerships that look to convene and promote dialogue. We have partnerships that look to align investments to the SDGs, to coordinate commitments to action, and those that seek to design solutions within or across sectors. I am particularly interested in those partnerships that are opening the way for a new way of working, that are bringing unlikely individuals or organizations together, and they're influencing the state ecosystem that needs to see this partnership form. I'm thinking, for instance, of the work we did back when I was in Uruguay, when we knocked on the door and successfully get on board the private sector banks to be part of a financial vehicle to support the second energy transition in that country. This is a facility governed by the state, the public utility company, and the UN, but it has managed to leverage and bring on board private banks who are now taking lending decisions using impact frameworks that have to do with the energy transition that Uruguay is seeking. Or when in the midst of the pandemic, we brought together, at no cost, by the way, every single social science research institution and university in the country to produce evidence on what a green and inclusive economic recovery should look like in Uruguay. Or what is about to happen in Colombia, where over 1,500 of our UN staff who are sitting in the territory will join hands with an extensive network of human rights, feminist, and indigenous and Afro-Colombian organizations that are part of the dialogue that need to take place to shape the next national development plan. So these are all examples of the UN getting out of its usual mode. And let me mention, following on Olga's presentation, how delighted we are to be part of the recently launched Multi-Stakeholder platform, Colombia. I represent the UN at the platform, and I remain committed to pulling the full UN cities' weight to succeed. We see this space as the mother of all multi-stakeholder partnerships in the country, if you will, a wonderful opportunity to work across governments. It was mentioned that we're now transitioning to a new leadership in early August, but also showcasing what it looks like to take calculated risks together and push forward a new logic of collaboration among all these actors. So we will work to ensure that this doesn't remain a consultative mechanism, but rather that it becomes basically a showcase of what working to shape public and private action looks like and how we tag ourselves to concrete and measurable transformation. I mentioned at the start that these partnerships need to take our UN teams out of our comfort zone. I remain, very, very aware of that. In fact, I feel that if we don't push ourselves and it's a bit uncomfortable, we're probably not doing the right thing. The offices of the resident coordinators across the globe have now installed additional capacities on partnerships. And above all, we have a very clear license to operate, empower our country teams to push these partnerships to new levels. And I'm mindful that this requires showing a different pace to the UN, being humble, recognizing the expertise that others have, capacities, knowledge that these other partners can bring. It means using our impartiality, our legitimacy, and our convening power to mobilize others so that they can do what they do best, and sometimes taking a backseat. Do not be too afraid of that. We're so embedded in implementing that sometimes it's hard for us. But there are others that do some of the things that need to be happening better than do, and our role in that case, enabling the partnership and the space for that collaboration. I look very much forward to working with P4G and the various ecosystems, particularly the very active impact investment ecosystem that exists in Colombia. We're doing a fair amount of work with private investors in the most conflict-affected territories in the country. And we know that social inclusion efforts will need to happen hand in hand with productive inclusion. And productive inclusion for a business ecosystem that is mostly micro and small businesses, has characteristics of its own. So these are all areas that we're working as a country team very much so. So we have a number of assets. I'll finish here just to say we have a program portfolio that can shape this investment pipeline that we're all looking for. We have a normative role that can inform the market on the public incentives that need to be put in motion. We have a technical assistance capacity for the design of the impact frameworks that need to accompany some of these investments. We have a voice for those that are being left behind, a knowledge network. But now, and maybe that's the novelty, the ambition to help shape and enable this partnership for the acceleration of the SDGs in the countries we serve, in my case, in Colombia. So I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mireia, for these wonderful insights. And I agree with you with the SDG 17 and the 2030 agenda. We have a new vision for sustainable development based on shared responsibility, but at the same time, we are still facing challenges in changing the way we usually operate. And I guess, and this is perhaps now with this, I want to turn to our second panelist and to hear some of the reflections of this. Mr. Chang-Soo Kim, who is counselor at the Embassy of the Republic of Korea to the United States. Mr. Kim served as the Director of Green Diplomacy in the Korean Ministry of Foreign Affairs from 2018 to 2019, where he engaged in the preparations for the second P4G summit. He has followed P4G since its inception until the summit last year. So, Mr. Kim, the same question goes to you on what would be your analysis and on the multi-stakeholder interaction with member states, but perhaps you could draw on your experience in the preparations of the P4G summit in 2021. As we heard from Ian de Cruz during the opening of this event, P4G brings together government, civil society organizations, and the private sector to accelerate the global response to climate change and the implementation of the SDGs. So, Mr. Kim, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clear and loud.
Okay, great. Well, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to this very valuable session. It's good to be back to discuss, issues on partnerships and P4G. Let me sort of take this audience back to stage or back to 2021 and explain where we were and what kind of situation we were faced with. As Ambassador Oh, explained in the opening, we were just into COVID, and we were trying to figure out how to get out of it, and yet be green. And at the same time, the world we were aimed to come up with a successful COP26 in Glasgow. So there were a lot of political momentum and concern at the same time on overcoming the COVID pandemic and rebuilding our economy while pursuing our green agenda, our SDGs, our climate goals. So with that, basis, the Korean government, we were tasked to host the second P4G summit, and we naturally came up with the theme that was focused on inclusive green recovery towards carbon neutrality. So that inclusive element means we bring in everyone together. So not just governments, not just international organizations, but also businesses, the civil society, and I think we even had the future generation participating at the summit. The green recovery element is the short-term goal of bringing back the economy on its feet, so that we are back on our feet and moving forward. That required a stimulus package, a lot of investment on the government side, but we tried to do it in a green way, focusing on green issues. And then there is that long-term goal. So it sounds like a cliche, but you always have to align your short-term goals with your long-term goals. And that was what the Korean government was trying to do by sending the right message to the domestic audience as well as the global, friends out there, that we are also trying to pursue the carbon neutrality goal by 2050. So with that theme we try to prepare the summit. And in the course of doing that, because we were aligning our short and long-term goals and making this a domestic policy, we were able to persuade the businesses in the domestic realm and the people and the civil society that we are actually very serious about this. If you have a green agenda for the recovery of the economy, a stimulus package for the short-term goal, aligning with a long-term policy of pursuing carbon neutrality by 2050, there is really no way out. You cannot get out of being green. So the one very proud, if you will, example that I would like to share is that in the recent couple of years since we started to prepare for the P4G summit in Korea, we started to see changes in the businesses. So all the well-known businesses in Korea started to attach themselves with the green agenda. So they were trying to advertise their company in relationship with sustainable development, in relationship with climate change efforts. So you open up an application of a major bank, and it would be saying on top a slogan, something of the nature of "for the future of our planet." So all of these changes. So you have your Samsungs, your LGs, your Hyundai Motors. They're all aligning themselves with green issues. So that transformation of the Korean society in general, not only the businesses, but the people and the future generation all coming together, the civil society coming together under, I suppose we could say, there were some leadership from the government front. All came very well. And I think that change within the domestic realm of Korea was one of the highlights or the success points of the summit itself. And if you go to the international realm, 2021 began with the Adaptation Summit led by Netherlands. I think it was held earlier on in the year, and then it was in April that the US held the Climate Summit, and Korea, we hosted the P4G Summit at the end of May, and then you had the UNGA and COP26 in Glasgow. So these series of high-level gatherings focusing on SDGs and climate change added on to the political momentum that we had to address building back better and also pursuing longer-term goals. And we were aiming to become a stepping stone to COP26. And I suppose I could say that we were a bit successful in that front. And that is the contribution perhaps that Korea made on the global level as host of the P4G. But going back to stakeholders and multi-stakeholders and partnerships within Korea, I must emphasize that it is very important to try to coordinate things very well among the different participants, especially when you're dealing with small to medium-sized companies and businesses that are not equipped with the resources and knowledge of addressing climate issues or pursuing sustainable development goals. You need some assistance, whether it be from a government level or support from the civil society or whatnot. So first, it's important to have that policy direction, the short and long-term direction, and then you need to coordinate very well among the various ministries, the various businesses, related businesses, and also civil societies to bring them together towards a direction. From our experience, I think we can quite confidently say that there is business-related issues here, and that is the only explanation that I can give you, because we have Korean companies moving towards green. We have the major, businesses out there, your major brand names, focused on climate issues and sustainable development issues because it is good for their business. But I think we need to go beyond that. It's not just putting out slogans for the big companies, the big brands, but actually finding a business model that will, bring benefit to the businesses and contribute also to addressing our global goals. But that front, that another extended jump, if you will, is still a challenge, I believe. So I'm looking forward to our continued efforts made under the P4G framework. I think it's a unique platform that focuses on partnerships, that brings the various stakeholders, governments, businesses, and civil society together. And with these continued efforts, I hope that we will be able to see a successful summit in Colombia next year and see more solutions on the business front.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kim, for sharing this experience in the preparations for the 2021 P4G Summit. And I agree with you. Having this balance between the short-term and long-term priorities or aspirations is essential for a new business model in sustainable development. Now, I want to turn to you, Mrs. Sonia Hernandez Barrado, to hear some of the perspectives and experiences from the private sector. Sonia is manager of model coordination and sustainability plans at Repsol. Sonia has been working at Repsol for more than 20 years in different positions. She has had the opportunity to be in different areas and businesses of the company, from the technology to refining business. In recent years, she has developed her professional activity in the area of sustainability, including in areas such as energy transition, circular economy, security and innovation, among others. So, Sonia, I have two questions for you, and I know you have a presentation, and I hope you address those questions through your presentation. The first one is, how has the private sector accompanied and enabled the fulfillment of the SDGs? And the second one, how could the private sector help promote the interaction between the government and the civil society? Sonia, the floor is yours. I'm not sure we can hear you. maybe our colleagues that are managing the connection can help us to understand what is happening with Sonia's sound. Perhaps for a taking into consideration the time, maybe Sonia, you come after our next speaker, our next panelist, Lisa Ashford, who is the CEO of Energize Africa and Ethics Lent a Hand. And Lisa, with over 20 years of experience in energy and environmental markets, is a leading voice in the areas of impact investing and sustainability. So Lisa, the same questions that I formulated to Sonia go to you. How has the private sector accompanied and enabled the fulfillment of the SDGs? And how could the private sector help promote the interaction between the government and the civil society? So Lisa, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invite to this extremely interesting event. So as has been described by Ian De Cruz from P4G earlier, Energize Africa is one of the UK's leading impact investment platforms. And Energize Africa really demonstrates that partnerships are key to success in this context. Energize Africa is a joint venture between Ethics in the UK and Lend a Hand in the Netherlands. And both are crowdfunding platforms that engage with ordinary people who invest their money to help solar businesses expand their activities in sub-Saharan Africa. And I just want to highlight a few different areas where the partnerships have been key. So firstly, originally set up as a mission from UK Aid, which is now FCDO, they were looking at using how could innovative forms of finance be used to help accelerate energy access within sub-Saharan Africa. And they threw down the gauntlet to us to come up with a platform that would be dedicated to this purpose. And they provided support to us in the early stages so that we could fast accelerate to set up the platform and expand. And P4G further supported us in both startup and scale-up stages to give us access across national platforms and help guide us to engage with institutions and realize our ambition to grow and expand. And to your first point, how has the private sector accompanied and enabled the fulfillment of the Sustainable Development Goals? Well, we have taken a huge leap forward to help try and fill that financing gap. With over £31 million raised, we have a 100% success rate in our funding campaigns with over 4,500 investors, ordinary people across the UK, investing in these businesses across sub-Saharan Africa. And that has led to over 870,000 people having access to clean and affordable energy, and over 180,000 tons of CO2 avoided every year. We have enabled over 15 organizations and 15 different countries across sub-Saharan Africa to scale, to provide them with flexible and affordable working capital where they have not been able to access that before. The banks, although the rhetoric is very positive about helping to finance the SDGs, is not doing so in a way that is accessible to these small and medium-sized enterprises. And that's where Energize Africa has moved in to help fill this gap. This has been recognized, and at the COP26, which was just mentioned, Energize Africa won the UN Climate Action Award for climate-friendly investments. And a crucial part of this model is that obviously through investment comes return, and over £15 million has been repaid, with a high percentage of this being recycled into further investments. So we have this evergreen expansion model which continues to benefit organizations as they scale and grow. Leverage has been mentioned, and from £3.5 million of match funding from government sources, over 27 million has been sourced from the crowd. So that's 13% from FCDO to 87% from the crowd itself. And coming on to the second question, how do we help promote this interaction? We use platforms such as ours to bridge between stakeholders. We show governments how to be entrepreneurial, working with these small and medium-sized enterprises, which are often missed by some of the development finance institutions who are looking at much larger scale organizations. And these SMEs are really the backbone of these developing economies. We provide technical support to these organizations at the ground level in order to enable them to grow. And then on the other side, we provide products to individuals, to ordinary people that align with their own moral compass, giving people really positive, tangible benefits, positive change that they can see. And importantly, we blend finance. So institutional finance and retail investment coming together to help de-risk these products for our investees and our investors. And we've worked across several of the national platforms that have been mentioned, and P4G has been instrumental in supporting us here, engaging with KEPSA in Kenya to look at the opportunities for raising finance through that private sector alliance. And in Ethiopia, creating a really high quality research piece on how to create favorable market conditions for financial services organizations like ours to thrive. And it's through these efforts that we hope we will be able to go from the millions to the billions that has been mentioned by Ian. And certainly we will be expanding our ambition to go from Energize Africa to Energize Earth, taking a climate first approach, but going beyond energy to be looking at climate smart agriculture and other sectors, and widening our geography into Southeast Asia and Indonesia. So we look forward to demonstrating how these types of solutions can really scale up impact in the area of the Sustainable Development Goals in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for that. And now, because we are running out of time for this panel, I want to go back to Sonia. Sonia, are you now able to make your presentation? Please keep your presentation short, as we only have 5 minutes to complete this panel.
Okay, thank you. I think that you are hear me. Could you hear me well now?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, could you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you, Sonia.
Okay, problems with the connection. Okay, so sorry, and I apologize for this connection. And I want to thank you, to you, Ernesto, and good morning for everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organization of this side event, and in particular, the National Planning Department of the Colombian government for counting on Repsol to participate in this event. Well, the agenda goals adopted in
Sonia, we are having some troubles in listening to you. I don't know if it's your connection. Sonia, can you hear us? Maybe Sonia is having some connection problems. Maybe we can, while she manage or try to fix that, maybe we can move to our next speaker, who is Helen Jordan. And please excuse me and correct me in case I mispronounce your name. From civil society, and as you know, civil society is a key stakeholder for ensuring an effective implementation of the SDGs. And we want to hear from that perspective, from the perspective of civil society. And I want to maybe ask, given the time, which is limited now, maybe just one question, and that would be, what experiences and lessons can be learned from the development of measures to promote the active participation of the civil society in the 2030 Agenda? So Helen, please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to this panel and for the questions. I think since I speak from the point of view of civil society, and many good examples have been given from other panelists, I'm going to a little bit elaborate on the collaborative work approach, which is a requirement for successful alliances between sectors, and see this a little bit from a civil society point of view. And we all know that partnerships are crucial and will enable parties to achieve much more and have much greater impacts and fully achieve the SDGs. And in Denmark, we have inspiring examples of private companies and organizations that work together towards a more sustainable production. So I'm actually not going to go too much into this kind of examples, but instead I'm going to ask you, why so do we still, 7 years after the adoption of the SDGs and with numerous statements from all sectors about the importance of partnerships, why is civil society at this very HLPF talking about the paradox of partnership, with reflections on the truest sense of partnership and people's alternative beyond the current framework development? And no less important, what would it take to make partnerships and collaboration the standard work approach between sectors? So I'm taking it a little bit further in that direction. But to understand this, it's necessary to look at the elements that must be present for civil society to endorse a collaborative approach. And in the definition of partnerships, depending a little bit if you choose the juridical, economical, or social definition, but there are three main common essentials. And one is a common interest or common goal. The second is mutual respect and trust. And the third is a willingness to compromise, adjust, and change. And if I have to start with a common interest, at the core of the problem of partnerships that private, public, and civil society actors act out of different primary interests, and that these at times are conflicting. Companies can buy raw materials and sell goods all over the world without taking the slightest notice of the destructive impact they leave behind, without compromising the primary objective of economic profit. And in the same way, civil society could keep fighting for preservation of nature and people's rights without having to deal with the economic interests of the private sector. But we must overcome this, and for that, we need to partner up for a new common goal, a change of paradigm and mindset. We must make it a common overall purpose to move from an extractive economy to a regenerative economy. And by extractive economy, I don't mean extraction of fossils and minerals only, but the mindset of extraction and exploitation. And this mindset is reflected at all levels, from underground exploitation of people and resources to greenwashing, unambitious legislation with tick-the-box solutions for real problems. Instead, we need to move together toward a regenerative economy where commodities are produced and transported and sold from a perspective of environmental, social, and economic sustainability. This also means that we need to be moving away from project-oriented partnerships to long-term commitments for structural change. But changing mindsets is a difficult exercise, and I will give you a short example. In the European Union, we are right now processing a directive on corporate due diligence for sustainability, as well as a directive to ensure that only deforestation-free products are allowed into the EU market. In these negotiations, We see private companies and organizations fighting a paper battle to ensure that the scope of the legislation is as narrow as possible, covering fewer companies with less value chain scope, fewer nature types to be protected, and fewer products to be included. That companies can take as little responsibility as possible, and that there should be no real sanctions. But in civil society, we work for the duties and responsibilities to be defined and placed, for scope to cover whole value chains, and for remedy for victims. So in these paragraphs, we see real problems for real people, and especially in the global south, where many goods are produced and resources extracted. We see the Amazon burning as we speak at the highest speed since 2016, and we see 25 million people who have no food to eat today. For civil society to engage in partnerships, we need a genuine engagement from the other sectors, a high ambition level, and a willingness to change, not to build back with an old mindset, but to build forward and looking for solutions together. The second aspect I want to mention is the question of mutual respect. It's very important because in many countries, especially in the global south, the culture of imposition and inferiorization built through history and enhanced by the unequal distribution of economic and political power in societies create environments of conflict rather than partnership. Defending the rights of communities to land, to territories, and to resources is often life-threatening endeavor. It takes so much courage to live with the threats, the persecution, being arrested, or simply shot, that it's hardly comprehensible in the global north. A local or indigenous community affected by a mining project that deprives them of their land and pollutes their environment are not in a place where they can take a collaborative approach, and the same is true for the international community supporting them. The point is here that where basic human rights and lives are not respected, there is no base for collaboration. In the global north, we are privileged in several ways. One of the most significant being that we have access to politicians and decision makers. We are invited to consultations, to multi-stakeholder debates and forums and advisory boards of all kinds. But we still have our battles to fight, such as issues of greenwashing and also an approach that I call polite disregard. In my work with advising the Resort Ministry on monitoring due diligence, over the past couple of years, I've counted 13 consultations, position papers, dialogue meetings, etc., all with a series of civil society recommendations, and none of these recommendations were ever put into practice. When engaging directly with the private sector, I've been told that I lack a thorough technical understanding of the necessities of business management, a common reaction to coping with differences of opinion within the polite disregard mindset. I have actually recently, in a public debate with a company director, been offered an internship in the company, after which I would be better equipped to understand the problems related to supply chain management, which I probably would. And I could have responded. I'm going to finish this in just a second. My final point is that I could have easily responded to this by offering the lady an internship in a Congolese mine, an indigenous community in the Amazon, or in a textile workshop in Bangladesh. But I didn't, because we need to establish mutual respect, not to water the seeds of conflict. But involvement of civil society must be safe, respectful, and meaningful in all countries and all contexts. So therefore, my message today is this. Partnerships are crucial for sustainable development at local level as well as global level, and civil society is ready and willing to come to the table with a collaborative approach. But there can only be collaboration and partnerships with civil society if and when there is a genuine interest in working for the same sustainable future, a true respect for the people and the nature that we represent, and a real commitment to change our mindsets together. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Helen, for your input and these important messages. Sorry, the time flies, and now we have to go to the closing part of the event, and apologies for the technical issues in the presentation by Sonia. So the presentation will be available as in the planning department webpage, and apologies for that. And now I hand over to Olga for the closing section. Thank you very much, and thanks to all the great speakers and audience for being part of this lively panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernesto, and thank you to all the panelists for their interventions. I'm sorry about the technical logistics that we have had, but everything will be on the webpage. You will find the presentations as the whole event. I'm going to introduce Ms. Maria Louise Koch, Deputy Permanent Representative of the Kingdom of Denmark to the United Nations, who is going to give us some closing remarks on the event. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Olga. And thank you to our co-organizers, Colombia and the Republic of Korea, for organizing the event. And thank you so much to the panelists. It was really wonderful to start the morning here in New York with a good doses of hope, because it was really, I think, hope-inducing to listen not only or not least to the results and the potential from the public-private partnerships that we heard about from particularly Ian and Lisa. And hope is really what we need, because when it comes to the SDGs, my colleague from Korea said it in the beginning, we are not only on track, we are sort of backsliding due to the multiple crises that the world is facing. So we do need to find new solutions. We do need to innovate, and we do need to work together. But I think also what the discussion today has shown is that we need to become very concrete on how to work in partnerships in a meaningful way, and when to use which models of engagement and cooperation in what situations. Let me just at the end just highlight the Unmute initiative that Denmark co-leads, which is more focused on UN, on the civil society engagement in the UN. Because it's an example of where we start, where we try to become concrete, because we have a number of governments have sitting together with civil society and really sort of come up with concrete and tangible recommendation for better civil society inclusion in the UN process. Another example from my own world is our own VNR last year, which was also, we made a process where we really engaged private sector, civil society, local authorities, with the result that it really became a much more deep and meaningful process for everyone involved. So the point is that I think that I will take away from this, and I want you to take away from this, is that we talk a lot about the necessity of public-private partnership cooperation, and it's not just something that we do for the sake of it. It really makes sense. It enriches processes, but it only works if everybody around the table takes responsibility for the cooperation and for the results. And most states, for sure, and the UN, for sure, need to be more open and understanding to engage with civil society. Helena was pointing to some of the issues there. But there's also a responsibility for cooperation aligned with civil society and business. One of the I think it was Mr. Shang-Soo Kim who told about the challenges with working with business in sort of on a technical level. So we all need to get better at this and to determine what models work when. And I think one of the ways of doing it is getting better is just doing it a lot, but also be smart about it and learn from each other's experiences, which is, I think, what we have to do today. And I think these good examples and all this thinking that goes into this is something that we really will need to take with us when we need next year to deliver on a forum for the future, where here in New York, where of course the multi-stakeholder approach will be very, very important. So thank you all, and very happy to be part of this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your closing remarks. I'm going to give the word now to Duván Ocampo from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Colombia. Duván, the floor is yours for the closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Their Excellencies, ambassadors Hyung-Yu Oh and Marie-Louise Koch-Vekta, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to thank the panelists who joined us today for sharing with us their experience on public-private initiatives. We're halfway through the implementation of a 2030 agenda. Hence, we should consider the relevance of partnerships among different spheres of society to achieve the SDGs. This requires commitment from all stakeholders, whether private or public. Therefore, mechanisms such as the multi-stakeholder platform should be strengthened. In our experience, the multi-stake platform enhances a country's ability to track the implementation of the SDGs. The COVID-19 pandemic posed a huge challenge for sustainable development. Together, we must deepen our efforts to build back better and realign the track we set for 2030. We believe a multi-stakeholder approach is the key to pump up the efforts in this decade of action to deliver the SDGs. I would like to point out here the lessons learned from the P4G initiative. P4G is a collective effort, as Ian de Cruz pointed out. It is important in this sense to recognize the leadership of the Kingdom of Denmark and the Republic of Korea in this platform. These countries organized the P4G 2018 and 2021 summits respectively. And we approach the P4G summit to be held in a developing country for the first time in October 2023. So Colombia is proud to work with these two mentioned pioneer countries to gather meaningful lessons to host our own P4G summit in October 2023. I finally wish to thank all the distinguished panelists and attendees who lent us their time and wisdom today. We are confident that through the creative interaction among state and non-state actors, we will increase our chances to fulfill the historic challenges of the 2030 agenda. We wish to invite the representatives of your countries and organizations to join us at this P4G Summit to exchange ideas on how to better fulfill the Global Goals 2030 through collective action. Let's continue to advance together, sharing one another's best qualities. Colombia wishes to see you all in our country again in October 2023, so save the date. There, we will prove once again that collective solutions to achieve a greener, more equitable future work definitely better than isolated ones. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Duban, and thank you again to all the panelists and the participants in this event. We thank you for being connected and hearing all these experiences on the importance of the engagement of different actors in advancing in the SDG agenda. Thank you again. Have a good day, rest of the day. Bye.